Sometimes a story doesn't begin with a shout. It begins with a document laid flat on a polished table, the weight of it heavier than anyone in the room wants to admit. That afternoon in Lake Forest, the room was full of family, silver trays, and controlled breathing. Savannah Reed was not there to fight. She was there because she had been told to show up. Savannah was 31, a commercial interior designer who had built a modest firm in Madison, Wisconsin. What happened in that dining room was not just about money. It was about who gets to stay inside a family's structure and who is formally removed from it. The folder was already open when I sat down. Douglas Mercer didn't look uncomfortable. He adjusted his glasses and spoke in that steady estate planning tone I grew up hearing in my father's study. Savannah, this is an amendment to the Reed Irrevocable Family Trust. It reallocates discretionary beneficiary interests and consolidates management authority under Harper. My sister didn't move. She didn't need to. I looked at my father. Consolidates how William kept his hands folded. It simplifies the structure. Douglas slid a second document toward me. This is a disclaimer of beneficial interest. If you execute it, you voluntarily relinquish your current and future interest in the trust corpus. And if I don't sign, Douglas didn't hesitate. The trust contains a no-contest clause. Any beneficiary who initiates litigation challenging the amendment forfeits all future distributions. I looked at the document. It was a clean administrative removal. If I refused, I would be locked in a decade of litigation against a family with infinite resources. I would be buried in legal fees before I could even file a discovery motion. To fight for a future inheritance was to surrender my present survival. Celeste leaned forward, her voice calm. We can't keep underwriting uncertainty. Savannah, this is a business decision. You've chosen a path that's unpredictable, Harper added. That's your right, but it doesn't obligate the rest of us. I felt something settle in my chest. Clarity. They weren't asking. They were auditing me out of existence. I picked up the pen. I signed. The room exhaled. I stood up. Is that all? William nodded once. That's all. No one walked me to the door. Outside. My phone buzzed before I reached my car. A text from Harper. It didn't have to be difficult. I didn't respond. By the time I reached Madison that night, I had $6,400 in my business account and 3 open contracts. Within 2 weeks, 2 of them disappeared. The first client called on a Monday. Savannah, we've decided to terminate the renovation. We heard there may be fiduciary concerns. Fiduciary concerns, I asked, my heart sinking. Based on what I'd rather not say, the second cancellation was an email. Short. Careful. It used the exact same phrase. My firm, Blue Heron Interiors, was small but stable. There were no liens, no unpaid invoices. Nothing justified that language except a deliberate whisper campaign. My phone lit up again. It was Marcus Delaney. Someone has been making calls. Savannah. Confidential warnings suggesting financial instability and family trust removal. They are connecting dots they know people will finish. Harper, I whispered. I can't prove it yet. But if this rises to tortious interference with prospective economic advantage, we have options. I looked around my apartment. No silver trays, just me. I don't want to fight her in a courtroom she owns. I told him. Then build. Marcus replied. But build fast. I ended the call. If they wanted me outside the structure, I would build my own. The third cancellation came on a Tuesday morning. I was halfway through my coffee when my phone buzzed. It was Dan Whitmore, a developer out of Milwaukee. We had been planning a mixed-use renovation for almost 3 months. Savannah, I need to put this on hold, he said. On hold or off the table. A pause. I heard papers rustling on his end. Off the table. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. Is this about the budget? It is not about the design. Savannah, then what is it about another pause? Longer this time. We have heard there might be complications tied to your name. I do not have specifics. I just cannot take the risk. My name, that is all I can say." The line went quiet. I sat there staring at my reflection in the dark screen. My name. Not my work. Not my numbers. My name. Blue Heron Interiors had no liens, no outstanding debt, and no pending litigation. I paid vendors early and tracked every invoice down to the cent. I had never missed payroll. There was nothing in my books that justified the word risk. By noon, I was in Marcus Delaney's office in Chicago. He slid a legal pad across the desk. 2 brokers confirmed they received private communications raising concerns about your financial reliability from Harper. I stated, "I do not have a recorded admission, but the language matches fiduciary instability, reputational exposure, family trust removal." I felt my jaw tighten. "She is using the trust against me." Marcus leaned back. "She is implying that if your own family restricted your beneficiary interest, others should be cautious. By itself, it is a whisper. But when it interferes with a foreseeable economic relationship, it becomes tortious interference with prospective economic advantage." I looked down at my hands. They were steady. "So, what do I do?" "For now, nothing reactive. We gather, we document. We move carefully." "Savannah," Marcus added quietly, "this is not personal gossip. It is strategic." "I know," I replied, and that was the part that made it worse. Marcus called 3 days later and told me to come back. He didn't waste time with small talk. A printed email sat on his desk, highlighted in yellow. This came up during a due diligence request tied to a Chicago broker. It wasn't addressed to you. It wasn't even meant for you. I picked it up. From Harper Reed to private broker distribution list. Subject line, heads up. The body was careful. No accusations. No statements of fact. Just language that floated. Given recent restructuring within my family trust and certain fiduciary concerns, I would exercise caution in extending substantial commercial exposure to Savannah Reed or her related entities. My throat felt tight. She used the trust amendment. She used the implication. Marcus corrected. "She never says you did anything wrong. She just connects dots she knows people will finish." "There are more." He slid 2 additional pages across the desk. Different recipients, same phrasing, same tone. All from a personal Gmail account, not her firm address. "That matters," he continued. "It shows intent to separate this from her employer. She planned it." He didn't argue. I sat back in the chair and stared at the ceiling for a second. I wasn't surprised. That part scared me. "She's building a record," I said quietly. "So if I fail, it looks inevitable." Marcus folded his hands. "Under Illinois law, if we can show those communications directly caused identifiable economic loss, that's tortious interference with prospective economic advantage. And if we can't, then it's just reputation warfare." The word hung there. I traced the margin of the printout with my finger. "She knows I can't afford litigation right now. She's betting you won't escalate." I handed the papers back. "I won't." "Not yet." Marcus studied me for a long moment. "Then what's the plan?" I thought about Lake Forest, the dining room, the pen, the way everyone avoided my eyes. "I leave the market she controls." "Geographically, yes." He leaned forward. "You're serious. I don't fight her where she's strongest." There was a quiet beat. "You have something in mind. A referral I've been ignoring. Commercial developer in Indiana. Adaptive reuse project." Marcus nodded slowly. "If you go clean, form a proper limited liability company, separate everything, capitalize it correctly. I will." As I stood to leave, he added one more thing. "Savannah, document every communication from now on." I already am. When I walked out of his office, I didn't feel defeated. I felt clear. Harper had made her move. Mine would just look different. I almost didn't take Evelyn Vaughn's call. The referral had come through a contractor I trusted. She's direct. He'd warned me, and she doesn't waste time. We met inside a half-demolished industrial building in Carmel, Indiana. Dust in the air, exposed brick, old beams running across the ceiling. The place smelled like concrete and sawdust. Evelyn stood near the window, sleeves rolled up, phone in one hand. "You're Savannah." "I am." She gestured around us. $185,000 adaptive reuse renovation. Loft offices upstairs, retail on the ground floor. "I don't want trendy. I want durable." I walked the space slowly, counted windows, measured the light with my hand, listened to the echo. "You'll need to reinforce that beam," I told her, "and move the stairwell back at least 4 feet if you want proper sight lines." She watched me carefully, not impressed, just evaluating. "You see it already." "I see what it could be." That made her smile, just slightly. The project moved fast. I drove back and forth from Madison for 6 weeks, slept in budget hotels, ate takeout on overturned drywall buckets. It wasn't glamorous. It worked. When the space opened, tenants signed within days. Evelyn met me in the finished lobby, hands in her coat pockets. "You're underpriced." "I'm realistic." "You're underpriced," she repeated, "and you're in the wrong state." I looked at her. "Northwest Arkansas," she continued, "Bentonville, Fayetteville. Every quarter, another supplier relocates because of Walmart. Executives need houses. Vendor teams need office conversions. It's the fastest growing corridor nobody respects yet. I don't have contacts there. You'd have mine. That stopped me. I don't do charity." Evelyn added, "If I invest, it's equity. Structured, clean. How much equity? $220,000 initial capital. 30% stake in a new limited liability company. You operate. We split profits according to ownership. That's not small." "No, it isn't." I thought about Madison, about Chicago brokers, about Gmail messages sent from personal accounts. "If I relocate," I began carefully, "everything is separate, new entity, new bank accounts, clean capitalization." "Good," Evelyn replied. "I don't like messy books." I nodded once. "Then I'll move." She didn't react dramatically, just extended her hand. "Bentonville," she said. When I drove back to Madison that night, the apartment felt smaller than usual. I packed slowly. Sample boards, client files, my laptop. I left Lake Forest quietly. I would not leave this time quietly. Blue Heron Interiors became official by the end of my first week in Bentonville. The articles of organization were filed, and the operating agreement was drafted with surgical precision. I opened a separate business checking account with $220,000 in initial capital from Evelyn. Her 30% ownership was documented in writing, ensuring clean capitalization just as I had promised. I rented a small office above a coffee shop downtown. The floors creaked and the internet dropped twice a day. But it was enough. Year 1 was controlled chaos. Corporate vendors relocating from out of state needed executive housing designed quickly. 1 kitchen renovation turned into 3. A home office install evolved into a full residential redesign. By December, Blue Heron's gross revenue reached $420,000. The net operating profit was just under $90,000 after expenses. I did not take a full salary. Instead, I reinvested every cent. Evelyn reviewed the numbers every quarter without sugarcoating her feedback. "You are leaving margin on the table," she remarked. "I am stabilizing." I replied, "You are thinking small. I am thinking long-term." She studied me for a second and nodded. "Good." Year 2 expanded into commercial work. A supplier relocating from Minnesota leased a warehouse near downtown and needed an adaptive reuse conversion into open-plan offices. The construction budget was $680,000. I negotiated a 10% equity stake in the project instead of a higher design fee. Evelyn approved it immediately. "Equity compounds," she said. "Fees disappear. By the end of year 2, gross revenue hit $680,000, and net operating profit reached roughly $150,000. My equity in that first commercial redevelopment was already appraised at around $400,000. Year 3 moved even faster. We partnered on a mixed-use retail redevelopment valued at over $5 million after completion, where I held an 8% equity stake. Another warehouse conversion closed at nearly $7 million post-renovation, in which I secured 10%. Blue Heron's gross revenue reached $910,000, with net operating profit climbing to just over $200,000. The operating company itself, based on a 4x multiple of earnings, was valued at approximately $840,000. I owned 70%. But the real shift was the real estate. One afternoon, Evelyn spread a stack of appraisal reports across her table. You are sitting on roughly $1,360,000 in commercial equity, she told me, plus retained earnings and your residence. I had bought my house for $620,000 the previous year. The appraisal now showed $785,000, leaving my equity after the mortgage balance at approximately $430,000. Lake Forest had been $2,800,000 in trust assets I could never touch. This, however, was mine. Structured, documented, earned. My total net worth was approaching $4,650,000. Evelyn poured more coffee. There is another opportunity, a parcel in Lake Forest, adjacent to your family's property. It is listed at $1,200,000. They will see the buyer's name, I said after a long silence. Let them. The next morning, I called Marcus. I am signing the purchase agreement for the Lake Forest parcel. I want a title search and a boundary survey. No loose ends. I don't do loose ends. He replied. I was no longer reacting. I was positioning. The notice went out on a Wednesday morning. Standard procedure. My attorney in Illinois filed for a boundary survey and preliminary title review on the Lake Forest parcel. Because it bordered the Reed residence, their counsel had to be notified. By Thursday afternoon, Marcus called. Douglas Mercer reached out. I was standing in my Bentonville office, staring at a finish board for a hospitality client, and he confirmed you're the purchasing member of Blue Heron Holdings. I am, he sounded unsettled. That almost made me smile. Almost. Did he ask about financing? Yes. I provided proof of funds, verified assets, no debt encumbrances beyond standard commercial leverage. Good. There was a pause. Savannah, Marcus continued. Voice more measured now. He also requested clarification regarding your capital structure, as in whether any Reed family funds were involved. Correct. They weren't? I know that. He needed to hear it formally. I sat down slowly. Did he mention Harper? Not directly. That meant yes. The survey was scheduled for the following week. I flew into O'Hare the night before and drove north in a rental car. I hadn't been back to Lake Forest since the trust meeting. The street looked smaller than I remembered. The vacant parcel sat to the left of my parents' property. Untouched grass. Tree-lined thick along the back. Quiet. The surveyor, a middle-aged man named Colin, stepped out of his truck and extended his hand. You the owner. Yes. He glanced toward the Reed house. They know you're here. I assumed. We walked the perimeter in silence while he marked boundaries with bright orange flags. The wind was colder than it should have been. Halfway through, a black sedan pulled into my parents' driveway. My chest tightened. I kept my eyes forward. Colin cleared his throat. This line here puts you about 12 feet from their existing fence. Good to know. Footsteps approached from the other side of the property line. Savannah. I turned. William stood there, hands in his coat pockets. He looked older. Not dramatically. Just tired. You're buying land next to us. Yes, for development. For holding. He studied the survey stakes. Douglas informed us your portfolio valuation exceeds $4 million. It does. Silence stretched between us. You built that alone. Yes. He nodded once, slowly. Harper's voice carried from behind him. Dad, this isn't the place. She stepped forward, controlled as ever. You understand this acquisition creates unnecessary friction. It creates a boundary. I replied. Her jaw tightened. If this is about retaliation, it isn't. Colin walked past us with a clipboard, pretending not to hear. William shifted his weight. Savannah, we didn't expect this. I didn't expect a disclaimer either. The words landed without heat. Just fact. Harper folded her arms. You're making a statement. I'm making an investment. For a second. No one spoke. Then William looked at the orange flags marking the property line and said quietly, It's yours. And this time, no one could move it. The cease and desist went out the following Monday. Marcus drafted it under his firm's letterhead, 5 pages, tightly structured and cold. It cited specific communications, attached copies of Harper's emails, and referenced Illinois case law regarding tortious interference with prospective economic advantage. The language was clear, devoid of theatrics. If you continue disseminating false or misleading statements regarding Savannah Reed or her related entities, legal proceedings will be initiated without further notice. I did not read it twice. One time was enough. Send it certified, I told Marcus. It will reach her office directly. By Thursday morning, Harper had it. I was back in Bentonville reviewing contractor bids when my phone buzzed. Her name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. It rang again. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, Marcus called. She is furious. She denies intent, claiming she was exercising professional caution. From a personal Gmail account, I asked, Exactly. In a large firm, ethical exposure is a massive reputational risk. The partnership track depends on stability and discretion. This documentation puts her in a position of significant liability, so she loses the promotion, likely delayed, possibly suspended from client-facing matters pending a risk management review. 2 days later, Harper appeared in Bentonville without warning. I was at a job site when my assistant texted that a woman was asking for me. I knew who it was before I walked through the door. She stood near my conference table, her posture perfect, but her eyes were scanning my world, the sample boards, the framed permits, and the signed lease agreements. You could not answer your phone, she said. I chose not to. You escalated this. She stepped closer. You have no idea what a letter like that does inside a firm. I do. You are jeopardizing years of work. You jeopardized mine first. That was protective, she hissed. For whom the family removed me. Harper. Her jaw tightened. Silence filled the room. Finally, she exhaled sharply. Withdraw it. No. Her voice lowered. Savannah, if you succeed publicly like this, it rewrites our entire family narrative. It already has. For a moment, something flickered behind her control, not an apology, but something closer to fear. She realized I was no longer a variable she could manage. This is not over, she said. I am not trying to end you. Harper, I am simply building. She left without another word. Outside, the Arkansas sun was too bright. Inside, my hands were steady. The line had been drawn. The call came from my father 3 weeks later. I almost did not answer, but then I did. Savannah, his voice sounded thinner than I remembered. I am here. A long pause followed. I could hear paper shifting in the background, perhaps in his study. At the same desk where Douglas Mercer had placed the trust amendment, I reviewed the letter your attorney sent Harper. He said, I assumed you would. She should not have done that. The words were simple. No defense. No justification. I know. I did not authorize those communications. He added, I believe you. He let out a heavy breath. Her firm has reassigned her to internal compliance review. She is off client matters for the foreseeable future. I pictured Harper in a windowless office, sidelined by the very system she had tried to weaponize. That was not my goal. I know. The silence that followed felt less rigid than before. Savannah, Douglas also confirmed your holdings, your commercial equity positions, and your operating company valuation. Yes, you have done well. It was not praise, it was an acknowledgement of fact. I have worked. I replied, I see that now. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I do not expect you to come back. I understand why you would not. I looked around my office at the development renderings pinned to the wall. I am not trying to come back. I know. His voice softened. I made decisions based on structure and control. I thought that was stability. It was control. I corrected. Yes, that word landed heavier than any apology. I cannot undo the trust amendment. It is irrevocable. But I can acknowledge I was wrong. I sat with that for a long time. I appreciate that. I told him. It was not reconciliation, but it was a boundary line that both of us could finally see. The Lake Forest parcel closed in late autumn. I did not build a house on it. Instead, I converted the land into a small creative campus over the next year. It featured studio spaces and shared workrooms with lease agreements structured specifically for early-stage designers and architects who could not yet afford Chicago rents. I ensured the contracts were transparent and the terms were flexible. I named it the Reed Collective not to reclaim the family legacy, but because it was my name. Harper never called again. Marcus informed me that her firm had delayed her partnership review indefinitely. She stayed in her role, working quietly in the background. My father, however, began to write. His letters were short and devoid of legal jargon, containing only updates about the garden or the old oak tree near the fence line that now technically bordered my property. I responded sometimes, not out of obligation, but because I finally had the space to choose. Last month, he walked across the grass while contractors were finishing the final studio build-out. He stood near the boundary stakes, looking at the structural integrity of the site. You did this without us, he said. Yes. He nodded slowly. It is solid. That was the goal. We did not hug. We did not revisit the trust or reopen the past. He simply walked back to his side of the line. That evening, I sat alone in one of the unfinished studios. My phone rested on my knee, displaying the operating reports from Blue Heron. My total assets across all holdings were just above $4,600,000 commercial equity, retained earnings, and land value. It was structured and clean. I once thought success would feel loud and vindicating. It did not. It felt quiet. I did not win a courtroom battle. I built a separate structure and stood inside it. I no longer measure myself against Harper. The line exists. It is legal, physical, and emotional, and it stays.